Welcome to In-Silico Trials Real Impact, the In-Silico UK podcast that's revolutionizing the way we think about medical innovation. I'm Professor Alejandro Frangi from the University of Manchester, and I'll be your guide through this fascinating world of in-silico technologies. In each episode, we'll dive into cutting-edge research and groundbreaking news that are shaping the future of medical product development and regulation. From computational modeling to simulated clinical trials, we are exploring how digital approaches are transforming healthcare, making it safer, more efficient, more equitable, and incredibly precise. So, whether you're a researcher, regulator, a member of the public, or a patient representative, or simply curious about the future of medicine, tune in as we unravel the complex world of in-silico methods and their real-world impact. Get ready to discover how computer-simulated trials are leading to very real breakthroughs in patient care. In-Silico Trials Real Impact, where algorithms and data are saving lives. Let's begin.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that's surprisingly complex.
Okay.
Figuring out the safest and most effective medication doses for pregnant women.
Yep.
It's not as straightforward as you might think.
Right.
And we're going to explore why that is and how cutting-edge research is using computer models to try to get it right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's way more complex than I think most people realize.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've got some fascinating sources to guide us today.
Okay.
A research article that outlines a new framework for determining what they call model-informed doses, using the antidepressant sertraline as an example.
Interesting.
And we also have a study that surveyed both healthcare providers and pregnant women about their thoughts on actually using these types of doses.
Got it.
So think of us as your guides to the most important insights from these sources.
I like that. Your guides to the information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start with the problem. It might be surprising to hear that over 80% of pregnant women use some form of medication during their pregnancy.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that pregnancy causes significant changes in a woman's body.
Right.
Affecting how medications are absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and eliminated.
Okay.
Metabolized basically means how your body breaks down the drug.
Okay.
And eliminated refers to how it gets flushed out of your system.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
So how does all of this then impact medication doses during pregnancy?
Well, most drugs haven't been specifically studied in pregnant women, which creates a knowledge gap when it comes to safety and efficacy.
Yeah.
It's a sensitive area.
Right.
And historically, there's been a lot of hesitation around conducting clinical trials with pregnant women.
So doctors are kind of left to make educated guesses?
Yeah.
That seems a little unsettling.
It can be.
Yeah.
The current practice is often to either use standard adult doses or reduce them out of caution.
Oh, okay.
But that's not always ideal.
Makes sense.
It could mean the medication isn't effective enough for the mother.
Right.
Or there could be unintended risks for the fetus.
Yeah.
That's a delicate balance.
You don't want to undertreat or overtreat.
Exactly.
So is this where model-informed dosing comes in?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's an innovative approach where we use computer models to simulate how a drug behaves in a woman's body during pregnancy.
Interesting.
These models can use data from various sources, not just pregnant women, to paint a virtual picture of how the drug is processed.
So instead of relying solely on limited data from pregnant women, we can use these models to kind of fill in the gaps and make more informed decisions about dosing.
Precisely.
Okay, that seems pretty smart.
It is, and it's important to understand that there are actually two main types of models used in this approach.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, you have what are called physiologically based pharmacokinetic models.
Okay.
PBPK for short.
Okay.
Imagine these like a detailed GPS map of the drug's journey through the body. They factor in things like blood flow, organ function, and how the drug is absorbed, metabolized, and eliminated.
Wow, that's incredibly detailed.
It is.
So what about the other type of model?
The other type is called a population-based pharmacokinetic model, or POP-PK. Think of this one like analyzing traffic patterns to predict travel times.
Interesting.
It takes data from various groups of people and uses it to predict how a drug might behave in a pregnant woman.
So it's like using existing information to make educated predictions about how the drug will act in a pregnant woman's body.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the beauty of these models is that they can provide valuable insights into potential dose adjustments.
Yeah.
Without needing to conduct extensive and potentially risky clinical trials on pregnant women.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But is it just about the models themselves, or is there more to it?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just have the models.
Okay.
The research article we're looking at goes beyond that. It proposes a framework, a systematic approach, to guide the creation and use of these model-informed doses.
Okay, so a framework to make sure this all works properly.
Exactly.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
What exactly does this framework consider?
Well, it's not just about the science. It's also about feasibility, ethics, and, importantly, the perspectives of both healthcare providers and pregnant women.
Okay.
In fact, they used sertraline, which we mentioned earlier, as a case study to see how this framework works in a real-world situation.
So it takes into account the practical aspects, ethical considerations, and what both doctors and patients think.
Yeah, it seems really thorough.
It is. Yeah. The goal is to make sure these model-informed doses are accurate, accepted, and actually used effectively.
Yeah, because what good is a brilliant solution if no one feels comfortable using it?
Exactly.
Right, that's a really important point.
Yeah.
So let's dive into what these different groups think, starting with healthcare providers.
Sure.
What did the survey reveal about their views on this new approach? Well, a significant majority, 83% of healthcare providers, actually found the current standard of care for medication dosing during pregnancy to be suboptimal.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty strong statement.
It is.
They're basically saying the current system isn't good enough.
Yes, and even more telling is that 97% of them believed these model-informed doses would improve the quality of care they could provide to their pregnant patients.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
If you have more precise information about how a drug will act in a pregnant woman's body,
right,
you can make better decisions about the dosage.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing it's not as simple as just handing doctors a new set of numbers, right?
You're right.
Yeah.
It's about more than just the numbers.
Okay.
Healthcare providers also brought up some really important information needs.
Okay.
They want a clear understanding of how the models work, what their limitations are, and what the evidence says about safety for the fetus.
Yeah.
They also want resources to help explain all of this to their patients.
So they want to feel confident and prepared before they start prescribing these new doses.
Exactly.
I can definitely understand that.
Yeah.
It's a big responsibility.
Absolutely.
What about pregnant women themselves?
Yeah.
How did they feel about this approach?
Well, the survey showed that a large majority, 77%, were willing to use these model-informed doses.
Okay.
But they also had some strong opinions about what they needed to feel comfortable with it.
Oh, I bet. I imagine most pregnant women would want to be very involved in decisions about their medication.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things they emphasized was the need to understand why a dose adjustment might be necessary.
Right.
It's not enough to just be told, take this much. They want to be active participants in the decision-making process.
I think that's so important. Pregnancy can be full of uncertainty.
Absolutely.
So having open communication and feeling like you're part of the decision-making can make a huge difference.
I completely agree.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this really highlights a crucial point.
Okay.
Pregnant women clearly value both safety, AD efficacy when it comes to medication.
Right.
But they also want to be informed and involved in their healthcare.
Okay, so we've talked about this framework.
Yeah.
We know healthcare providers are on board.
Right.
And pregnant women are open to it.
Yes.
Now, I'm really curious to see how this all translates into real-world action.
Sure.
You mentioned that the researchers used sertraline as a case study.
Right.
Can we dig into that a little more?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sertraline, as we've mentioned, is a commonly used antidepressant.
Right.
So it's a perfect example to see how this framework could work in practice.
And what did they find?
Well,
what were the key takeaways from that case study?
The researchers found that the physiological changes a woman goes through during pregnancy can actually reduce the levels of sertraline in her body.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So does that mean every pregnant woman taking sertraline needs to increase her dose?
Not necessarily. This is where that personalized approach we talked about comes in.
Okay.
The framework suggests that doctors should not automatically reduce doses during pregnancy unless the woman's symptoms start to worsen.
Got it.
And if an increase is needed, it should be done carefully based on how the woman is responding and with close monitoring.
So it's about finding the right dose for each individual woman rather than just having a blanket recommendation.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about using these models and this framework to make more informed decisions that are tailored to the unique needs of each pregnant woman.
This is fascinating.
It is.
It seems like this model-informed dosing approach has the potential to be a real game changer for medication safety and efficacy during pregnancy.
It does.
But I'm assuming there are still some limitations or challenges.
Of course.
Yeah.
More research is always needed.
Okay.
But this sertraline case study is a significant step towards more evidence-based dosing for pregnant women.
That's great news.
It is.
But are there other factors that could come into play when determining the best dose for a pregnant woman? Earlier, we briefly touched on how genetics can affect how people metabolize medications.
Right.
I'm wondering if that's relevant here.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And you're right, genetics can play a significant role.
Right.
The researchers actually explored that in the sertraline case study as well.
Oh, interesting.
They looked at a specific gene called CYP2C19,
Okay.
which can influence how the body breaks down sertraline.
So variations in this gene could potentially affect how well the medication works for different women.
Exactly.
Okay.
The framework suggests that genetic testing could be something to consider, especially for women who experience unexpected side effects, or if the medication doesn't seem to be working as well as expected.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It adds another layer of personalization to this whole approach.
It does.
We're not just talking about pregnant women as one big group.
Right.
We're recognizing that each woman's body is unique.
Yeah.
Underscores the importance of moving away from those generic one-size-fits-all dosing guidelines and towards a more tailored approach to medication management during pregnancy.
It seems like this approach could have implications for so many medications used during pregnancy.
It does.
It's pretty exciting to think about the possibilities.
Yeah, it's really fascinating work.
Yeah.
Really cutting edge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really is. It feels like we're on the cusp of a major shift in how we approach medication during pregnancy. But I imagine there are still some big questions looming out there, even with all these advancements.
Absolutely. One of the big ones is, how do we ensure this model-informed dosing framework is actually adopted widely and implemented effectively?
Yeah.
It's one thing to develop a great tool,
But
it's another to make sure it's being used correctly and reaching the people who need it most.
That's a great point. And I imagine there are logistical hurdles to overcome.
Right.
How do we train healthcare providers to use these models and interpret the data?
Yeah. How do we ensure pregnant women have access to clear, reliable information about this new approach?
Those are all critical questions we need to invest in education and resources for healthcare providers.
Yeah.
So they feel confident using these models and explaining them to their patients. And we need to make sure pregnant women have access to understandable information.
Right.
So they can make informed decisions about their care.
And let's not forget the need for ongoing research.
Absolutely.
The sertraline case study is a fantastic start, but it's just one medication.
Right.
There are so many other drugs used during pregnancy that need to be investigated using this framework.
Exactly. We need more research to explore how different medications behave in pregnant women's bodies.
Yeah.
And how these models can help us personalize dosing. And of course, all of this research needs to be conducted ethically and with the full participation of pregnant women.
Speaking of the ethical aspects, this whole topic raises some interesting questions about decision-making during pregnancy.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that pregnant women want to understand the why behind any dose adjustments. It seems like there's a real desire for shared decision-making between women and their doctors.
Absolutely. Those survey results were really telling.
Yeah.
Both healthcare providers and pregnant women expressed a strong desire for more information,
Okay.
clearer explanations, and a more collaborative approach to making decisions about medication. It's about moving away from that paternalistic model of medicine and towards a true partnership.
I think that's so important, especially during pregnancy. The stakes are high, and women want to feel empowered and involved in decisions that affect their health and the health of their babies.
Right.
Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes this framework so powerful. It's not just about plugging numbers into a computer.
Right.
It's about creating a system that prioritizes the unique needs and concerns of pregnant women.
It's about recognizing that pregnancy isn't a one-size-fits-all experience.
Really?
Every woman is different, and her medication needs will vary based on a whole host of factors.
Precisely. And this framework gives us a roadmap for using technology and data to move towards truly personalized, evidence-based decisions.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what will lead to better outcomes for both mothers and their babies.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
It is, yeah.
It's amazing to see how much progress is being made in understanding the complexities of medication use during pregnancy.
Right.
But it's also clear that there's still a lot of work to be done.
I agree. We've come a long way, but we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
The good news is that we're having these conversations, we're acknowledging the knowledge gaps, and actively working to fill them.
And most importantly, we're involving pregnant women in the process.
Right.
Listening to their concerns.
Yeah.
And empowering them to be active participants in their healthcare. That's something to be truly excited about.
It is. I'm optimistic about the future of medication management during pregnancy.
Yeah.
With continued research, collaboration, and a commitment to patient-centered care, I believe we can create a system that is both safe and effective for all women and their babies.
Yeah, and on that note, we want to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
If you are facing decisions about medication use during pregnancy, what questions would be most important to you? What information would you want to have?
Yeah.
How would you advocate for your own health and the health of your child?
That's a great point.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, informed decision-making is the most powerful tool we have.
It is.
Right.
I think that's a really good takeaway for everyone to think about.
I agree.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this has been a great conversation.
it really has. This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
It has.
We've learned so much
Yeah.
about the complexities of medication and how it relates to pregnancy.
Right.
It's been really fascinating.
Yeah, it's a very interesting area of research.
It is, and it's great to know that there's so much work being done to make sure that these medications are used safely and effectively for pregnant women.
Right. And I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
You know, we want to ensure the health of both the mother and the baby.
Yes, and it sounds like there's a lot of hope for the future.
There is, yeah.
With these new models and frameworks.
Right.
We can really move towards more personalized and evidence-based decisions.
Exactly.
And that's ultimately what's going to lead to the best outcomes for everyone involved.
It is.
Well, it has been a pleasure having you on the deep dive today.
It's been my pleasure as well. Thanks for having me.
And to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope you found this deep dive to be insightful and informative.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time.